This morning, I just want to ask the question, and here's where we're headed because we're going to take communion at the end. So the question is this: are you hungry? Are you hungry? So last November, I began a series on the Sermon on the Mount, which is the greatest sermon ever preached by Jesus. And he opens the sermon with these series of blessings. They're called blessing statements. They're called a beatitude. And who doesn't want to be blessed? I mean, that would seem like a no-brainer. I want to be blessed. I want the favor of God in my life, except for they're kind of topsy-turvy. So there's something about these blessings like, what? So Jesus starts off, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I'm like, the poor? And he says, blessed are those who mourn because they'll be comforted. It's like, I want to be happy. I don't want to mourn. And he says, blessed are the meek for they'll inherit the earth. Really? I thought the powerful inherit the earth. Well, today's blessing, it can sound pretty poetic, but it doesn't really make sense either. Verse 6 of Matthew chapter 5, verse 6. And I don't have it up there because you can pull it up in your hard copy because this is BYOB, year at Church on the Sound. Bring your own Bible. So bring it. And verse 6 simply just says this: blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled, or they'll be satisfied. You're like, wait a minute. Blessed are the hungry? By definition, if you're hungry, you're not satisfied. You're hungry. So I'll tell you what, if this particular beatitude was a television commercial, television ad, it would sound something like this. Blessed are those who drink beer, for they shall be surrounded by highly attractive and socially gifted women. In the first half of life, they will be satisfied. Blessed are those who have the latest smartphone with all of the features, who shall gaze on the screen with many colors and has all the information you ever need right at your fingertips. Just when you need it, they shall be satisfied. Okay, or what about, blessed are those who have golden retrievers, who go ahead and chase the little children around, the perfect little children, and love on them and make all the other people and their neighbors envious. Blessed are those people. Nah, that isn't the way that this blessing works. What is the blessing? What does it mean? What does the blessing really look like? And it really depends on hunger. You see, there's a problem that all of us have when it comes to hunger and thirst. Because no matter what you experience in life that's good and wonderful and pleasant, there's an end. They don't last. But Jesus says this: if you hunger and thirst for righteousness, you will be filled, a satisfaction that is unending. And we sang about this today, this God who doesn't end. So before we get into this, I want to spend about 15 minutes. I take a little rabbit trail right away. It's going to be based on 1 John chapter 5, verse 21. So if you want to go to the end of 1 John, just one verse, and then I'll tie it in. So John writes this: beloved children, or little children, guard yourselves from idols. You say, well, Nicholas, what on earth does an idol have to do with hungering and thirsting for righteousness? And here's what it has to do. All of us are born hungry. All of us are born needy. It doesn't really matter whether you're rich or poor, educated or uneducated. At the core of our being, there's this desperate need. There is a non-negotiable need, and it's a need that won't go away. You were born hungry. I was born hungry. And so actually, that hunger was described in a very well-known song written by that theologian from New Jersey, Bruce Springsteen. Everybody's got a hungry heart. Everybody's got a hungry heart. Lay down your money and you played your part. Everybody's got a hungry heart. It's true. What are you hungry for? What do you need? Because we all need. We're all hungry. All of us have a need. Well, so what do we need? Well, all of us need a sense of being loved. All of us need a sense of being belonging. I'll tell you right now, this young man here he has found a sense of belonging. And he knows, this is my house. This is my family because I belong, right? That's part of his story. God's knit him in here. And it is precious to see you every week, my brother. You know what? Every one of us we have to feel like we're significant. We matter to somebody. Every one of us has to feel secure and safe. But you know what? There's a dimension of our soul that needs something else. That needs something that only God can meet. There's a part of you that only God can meet. So in his Confessions that was written actually in the 4th century, Augustine put it this way. He said this, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." In other words, we have a hole in our heart that's restless until we find God. Until he brings rest to our soul and he fills it, because our soul was created for him and our soul was created by him. So we have this space. We have this hunger. And it's for God. And it's only a space that God can meet. And so God creates us with this neediness, this restlessness, this vacuum, so that restlessness would actually act as like a homing device that's going to bring us to God. So you experience that. It was intended to bring us to God. So we're healthy to the degree that we let God meet the deepest needs of our heart. We're healthy to the degree that our innermost need for love and significance and for connection is met first and foremost by God. We find fulfillment in that. But unfortunately, we live in this broken world, and you know what happened to our homing device? It got messed up. And our homing device is taking us to different places. We think that's what's going to satisfy us. That's what's going to fulfill us. That's where I get my sense of belonging. That's where I get my sense of significance. And it gets disoriented. I mean, the hunger's still there, but just pointing in the wrong direction. So here's interesting. The opening line of the song Hungry Heart goes something like this. Got a wife and kids in Baltimore, Jack. I went out for a ride and I never came back. Like a river that don't know where it's flowing, I took a wrong turn and I just kept on going. So you feel this restlessness, right? This emptiness, this unfulfillment. But instead of finding our life in God, what we do is we think to ourselves, if I only had that, that's what's going to fill my restlessness. The homing device is leading me in another direction. It's messed up. It's been hijacked. And so we think, if I only had that, if I only had that, if I only experienced that, that would do it. That would give me the satisfaction. That would meet the deep longing in my soul. And so we hunger and thirst for those things, and it never works. Boy, if I only had a husband that was much more compatible. If I only was the boss of my company, if I only had more money, that's what would do it. That would fill it. We hunger and thirst for those things, but there's no fulfillment in that. So Springsteen writes, lay down your money and play your part. So what do? We take a gamble. And so in the song, Springsteen writes about meeting this woman in a bar, and what he decides at that point is this. We took what we had and we ripped it apart. Meaning what? What we did was we met, we thought, you're it. Forget everything else. We ripped our families apart. We ripped our marriages apart. And we went for it, only to find out this. The relationship failed. And where's Bruce? Back in the bar. He's hungry. He's restless. Why can't we satisfy the restlessness? Why can't we fill that hunger and that thirst? We're trying to meet a need that only God can meet. He said, if I had this would give me the ultimate happiness. This would give me the ultimate satisfaction. If I had this would be the ultimate pursuit. See, the problem, friends, is not the hunger. We were created with hunger. And hunger drives pursuit. There's nothing wrong with a pursuit. Not at all. The issue is this. What is your ultimate pursuit? What are you going after? What are you willing to give? And where do you find that sense of rest? Listen, all of us have known people who are really well-resourced, right? They don't need to work. They've achieved success. And you're like, why do you keep on working? You've got more money to spend in two lives. Why do you work? The answer is not about the money. It's not about the possessions. It's about this need at the core of their being. They're hungry, and they haven't found satisfaction. They're hungry. They haven't found fulfillment. So you can have all the fame, all the possessions, all the world experiences, pleasures, comfort of this world. You get everything that you think is going to do it for you. But your homing device has been hijacked, and you're going after something that's not going to do it. It's not going to get you there because there's a place that you have in you that is for God alone. And when you meet God, that homing device that says, no, the restlessness that you have, that emptiness, that need, it is meant to point to me. And when you find me, all the other stuff you'll get to enjoy. See, there's nothing wrong with good things. There's nothing wrong with wonderful things and pleasure. There's nothing wrong with that. But when those things become the ultimate things, that's what John is addressing here. So there's a biblical word for this innermost desire that we have, this need that only God can meet, that we go ahead and say, no, I'm going to pursue that instead of God. You know what that's called? That's called an idol. It's when that good thing becomes an ultimate thing in your life, that's an idol. When the good thing in your life becomes an ultimate thing, says, listen, if I don't have that, I don't have anything. That's an idol. And so that's what John's writing about. And you think, well, Nicholas, come on already, idol? I thought an idol like one of those statues, those kinds of things. Yeah, in the ancient world it was that. I don't worship idols. I don't have anything to do with idols. I would never do that. And yet, idols are not just something that are these little statues. Idols are what we give ourselves over to. It's when the good thing becomes the ultimate thing. We say, God, I work this. I'm substituting my relationship with you and the need that I have for you with something else. So Romans chapter 1, Paul describes like this, how this happens. And he says this, they turn from their creator, and they turn to the creation itself, and they worship the creation instead of the creator. You think, well, I would never do that. I would never worship the creation instead of the creator. But again, what is worship? The word worship comes from an Old English word, and it means this, worth-ship. And you ascribe ultimate worth to something other than God. That's worship. And you see worship happen all the time. That's your God. Whatever you get ultimate worth with, whatever you say, I could never live without this. Whatever that is. I could never live. Life is not worth living if I don't have that. That's your God. That's what an idol is. So anything can become an idol, right? An advantage, any advantage that you have can become an idol. Anything that makes you stand out can become an idol. It could be your appearance. It could be how smart you are, how well you run the football, right? How well the defense is going, right? That can be an idol. Doesn't mean a good thing's always an idol, but when the good thing becomes the ultimate thing, that's idolatry. Idolatry's making the good thing into the ultimate thing. So sometimes people actually, they make an idol out of their tribe. So we have this sense of belonging, and the belonging becomes the idol. Or what we do is we can make an idol out of a nation. Listen, I believe in America, make America great. That's great. Who doesn't want to be great? But you can make an idol out of that. It's very easy. God is great. We want to make God's name famous and God's name great. Or if you're deriving your life from the fact that listen, I don't mean to say it, but I'm really not like them. I thank God I'm not like them. What are you doing? You can make an idol of that. You can make an idol out of your righteousness, right? And here's a crazy thing about idols. Idols produce an enormous amount of anxiety and stress. Because if indeed you, with your homing device, end up over here, and you start investing your life in this, and now there's all this pressure, what if? What if? I need to keep this thing going. I've got to make it. I can't miss out. By this time, I should be here. By this time in my life, I should have this. And I should be, all of that stuff, it produces anxiety and stress because idols have a tendency to do that. Joy's cousins were missionaries to Japan for a number of years. And I remember a number of years ago, they came stateside. We got to see them, and they began to share some stories about just Japanese culture. And it may not be the same today, but here's how it was back then. Listen, if you were a Japanese kid, you had one goal. You need to make sure you did your best to get into a good school. Because if you got into a good school, you would get into a good college. And if you got into a good college, then you would have a great career. But at any point of the line, you mess up and something happens where you're not able to perform, you're not able to measure up. You know what was happening? There were a rash of kids committing suicide. Why? Because that became their idol. That was the thing that became their ultimate. Idols produce stress, and idols produce lots of anxiety. So even if you do get what you're striving for, and people notice, boy, oh boy, he is so handsome. Or, you're so good and you're at the top and you're a CEO, which is great. It's wonderful. And you're thinking, I got it. I made it. And it feels good when you're at the top. I'm the king of the world. You got what you're striving for. People recognize you and they respect you for your intelligence or how well you can perform. There's one thing that's guaranteed about all that stuff is that being at the top, you can't be at the top forever. You just aren't. That doesn't last. But there is something that does last, and that's what Jesus is pointing out. There's something that is going to be this God who says there is no end to me. There's no end in what the being filled and being satisfied. So, in Proverbs chapter 8, if you want to just turn there for a moment, Proverbs chapter 8, the writer there, he talks about the wisdom of God, and he personifies the wisdom of God. He says, and this is what he says. You just drop down to, I think it's verse 35, right? Right, 35. And so it says, the wisdom of God, speaking here, and it says this, for whoever finds me, meaning wisdom, the wisdom of God, finds life and obtains the favor from the Lord. But those who miss me injure themselves. In other words, you don't hit the mark, you injure yourself. And all who hate me, meaning the wisdom of God, they love death. So he says, listen, if you find God, you find the wisdom of God, you find life. You're getting life from that. And you know what? You're going to be full. You're going to find fullness there. But if you miss out on that, he says, you're going to injure yourself. In other words, your homing device is pointing in the wrong direction. And if we get to the point where we're no longer interested now, I'm not even interested in finding life. In fact, you know what? I'm going to get to the point where I really hate life. You know what God says? It's not like God's being all angry and mean toward you. No, God's the source of life. And if you pull away from the source of life, you know where you're headed? Death. It's not that like God's going to come down, he's going to punish you because you turned your homing device in the wrong way. He's not going to come down and kill you because God's not a killer. The very act of turning away from God is turning toward death. That's what happened. And so the judgment of God is not that he comes down to you and he kills you. He doesn't have to do that. You're killing yourself. And God just has to let you go. And that's what you find in Romans chapter 1. They decided, listen, my homing device, I know I got this thing is going, part of it is pulling me toward God, right? Pulling me into reality, but I'm rejecting that. And I'm going to worship the creation instead of the creator. And I'm going to turn away and turn away. And God said, no, come back. It was a mercy. He's doing this. You know how, I don't know if you have one of those air tags, it makes that sound when you pull it away from the source. It's like, come back home, come back home. Right? And the keys are there, right? And God's doing that. But he doesn't overrule us, and you're like, no, I want this, I want this, I want this. And you pull away to the point at which you become obstinate. You know what God says after a period of time? Okay, go ahead. He lets you go. If you want to pursue death, I will let you go. And that's the judgment of God. It's where God lets us go. The punishment for sin is built into sin itself, right? Sin is inevitably sooner or later self-inflicting. So listen, if you go to White Castle, by the way, you scarf down 12 burgers in one sitting, God doesn't need to come down and make your stomach upset. That happens all by itself, right? It's built into the nature of the grease that you just ingested, right? It'll make you sick. That's how it is with sin. Sin makes you sick. And if you're not getting life from Christ, but you're trying to get it from that, trying to get it from that, trying to get it from that, and trying to get it from that, you're in the process of making yourself sick. And if you continue down that road and are so obstinate to the point at which you really hate this way, then you go into eternity in that direction. I mean, that's my understanding of what hell is. People say, how can a loving God send how can a good God, loving God, send people to hell? You know what my understanding is? God doesn't send anybody to hell. C.S. Lewis had it right. There's only two types of people in this world. Ready? Those who say to God, your will be done, and those to whom God says, okay, your will be done. That's it. So, let's get back to, what was the scripture again? We were in Matthew chapter 5, verse 6. Let's talk about it for a moment. He says this, blessed are those who hunger and thirst. After what? Righteousness. So what's that? What's righteousness? So a lot of times we think of righteousness, we think of like righteousness in terms of moral categories. That person's so righteous. Wow, they're so good. They're so just. They're so pure, whatever it is. And you know what? I think the biblical concept of righteousness, it involves that, but it's so much more than that. If you want to strip down what is righteousness, and it's this right relatedness, which is kind of a weird word, but it's right relatedness. In other words, I'm in right relationship. He says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for right relatedness, for being in right standing, in right relationship. He says they're going to be satisfied. So biblically speaking, if you are in right standing with God, to the degree you have right standing with God, that right relationship with God, and a right relationship with others, he says this, you're going to be filled. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for right relatedness in all aspects of their life. They're going to be filled. They're going to be satisfied. But the problem, as I said before, it's not the hunger. It's not the thirst. What are you thirsty for? What are you hungry for? Everybody's got a hungry heart. Everybody. So what are you hungry for? Where's your homing device taking you? Is it taking you toward life? Or is it making you sick? Is it heading that direction? That's what Jesus is saying. So I need to let you know, the one who's telling us this, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they'll be filled or satisfied. Jesus lived a very hungry life. Did you know that? So after he's baptized, well, here's what we find out. After he's baptized, Jesus does not go to do a miracle. He doesn't go to preach a sermon. After he's baptized, and he hears the words from the Father, this is my Son in whom I'm well pleased. I love my son. What does he do? Where does he go? He goes into the wilderness for 40 days, and he's hungry. What are you hungry for? Hunger's not a bad thing. What are you hungry for? Then there's another example in the Gospels where there is a man brings his son to Jesus, and this son, it says that he is possessed by a spirit. But if you looked at the way he was acting, it almost looked like there was if you've ever seen someone who's had a serious bout with epilepsy and just the things that happen to their body, that is a description almost like that. And Jesus makes this statement. And you wonder, what is this statement all about? He says, because they brought him to his disciples. The disciples couldn't do anything. And Jesus makes this statement. He says, "O unbelieving generation, how long shall I stay with you? How long should I put up with you?" But then he says this, "Bring me the boy." Why? Because Jesus had a hunger for healing. A hunger for healing. And then you see Jesus, when he loses, he hears about Lazarus. Lazarus is dead. And everybody's really upset because Jesus didn't come in time. And it says Jesus wept and he was troubled because he knew that this is not how life was meant to be. Death wasn't supposed to be the ruling element. What did Jesus have a hunger for? Life. Jesus has a hunger for life, and he lived with a hunger for life. That's why he said, "Lazarus, rise." And then you see Jesus, who not only had a hunger for life, but you see him on a cross, hanging from a cross. He says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." There's nothing more powerful than forgiveness. There's nothing more powerful than being forgiven, and there's nothing more powerful than extending forgiveness. Why? Because with forgiveness there comes freedom. Freedom. Father, forgive them. So what's Jesus hungry for? He's hungry for healing. He's hungry for freedom. What is Jesus hungry for? He goes to the city of Jerusalem, and he sees Jerusalem. And, Jerusalem was one of these magnificent cities at the time. And but there were, outside it looked wonderful. The temple that Herod had rebuilt was magnificent. But inside there was a lot of stuff that was happening. And it says this, that Jesus looked at Jerusalem, and he had a hunger. What was his hunger for? He says, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets, and you stone those who are sent to you, how often I have longed to gather you as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. But you weren't willing." What did Jesus have? He had this hunger. I want to protect you. Do you understand? I want to give you peace, but you rejected that. You let your homing device take you in a different direction. Jesus lived with hunger. What are you hungering for? So sometimes I think we lack hunger, if we're honest, right? In other words, the homing device is going off. The homing device is going off. You know what we do? We turn it off. We don't pay attention to it. Say, Jesus, I got to tell you right now, I'm doing good. I'm good. Yeah, things are going really well. I got it I don't know. I got it together. I must say, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I know I got my shortcomings, but don't we all, right? But for the most part, I'm good. I don't need hunger. I don't want hunger. I'm good. That's not how you get satisfied. Without hunger, you won't experience the deep fulfillment that only Jesus can bring. Being satisfied is when you start to really hunger for change. Being satisfied, being hungry says, you know what? There are things in my life that have got to go. There are things that I know that need to change. Hunger drives that. And you know what? If you don't have hunger, you can ask Jesus for hunger. You can say to Jesus, "Jesus, I don't have the hunger, but would you give me some of your hunger? Because you were driven by a hunger for healing, a hunger to forgive, a hunger for freedom, a hunger for peace, a hunger. Jesus lived with hunger. Say, Jesus, give me some of that hunger. And he will. So we're going to receive communion in a couple minutes. How do you know that Jesus can satisfy the hunger? How do you know? Well, in John chapter 6, Jesus makes some pretty astounding statements. One of them is this: I'm the bread of life. And he says, whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. What's he saying? I'm the source. I'm the source. But at the time, the group that Jesus was actually speaking to, there was a lot of pushback toward who he was. And so he goes ahead and he makes this statement. It's a pretty disturbing one. So I might as well just read it for you. It's in John chapter 6. And it's pretty graphic. And the Jewish audience, it definitely caught their attention. And here's what he said in verse 53. And by the way, it's been, I think, somewhat misinterpreted as well. He says, very truly, I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. And he goes in verse 54, whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. For my flesh is real food, and my blood is real drink. And whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me, and I in them. What? What are you talking about? So was Jesus speaking? This is one of those things like you study. Was it literal? And the answer would be a hard no. Say, why? Because the scripture is pretty clear. Genesis chapter 9. You don't eat blood. You don't drink blood. Nothing with blood. You don't do that. In fact, Orthodox Jews today will not even eat meat with blood in it. Blood needs to be drained out. And to eat someone's flesh, that was repulsive. It was just against God's command. So there's no way that it can mean that okay, because we're going to receive communion. As you know, there's a belief in a Catholic belief is that somehow when we celebrate communion, this turns into the body and blood of Jesus. No, it doesn't. It symbolizes the body and blood of Jesus. Jesus wouldn't say, drink my blood, eat my flesh. What was he saying, though? He was saying something. And I'll tell you right now, that got their attention. If they weren't listening before, they were listening then. Because it said many of them walked away from Jesus at that point. Here's what he's saying. He's saying, I'm what you're hungry for. I'm what you're looking for. You've been trying to consume all that stuff over there. No, it's me. Consume me. It's who I am. So to consume Jesus means you cultivate a relationship with Jesus. To consume Jesus means that you bask in not the love that he has for you, but you're also on mission with Jesus, just like he was. And you say, listen, at my core, where I have these needs, right? I'm hungry. I was born hungry. What do you need? Love. Jesus says, I've got that for you. At the core of your being, you receive love from Jesus first and foremost. And you receive significance from Jesus himself, first and foremost. At your core, security you receive from Jesus, first and foremost. And you invite Jesus into every nook and cranny in your life, every area. You invite him into the secret places. You invite him into the private places. You say, Jesus, come in. You invite him into the ugly places and in the dark places. And yes, you invite Jesus into the beautiful places as well. You let him come in and you let him shine his light on you. You say, yeah, there. I want you to be healed. I'm going to heal you and I'm going to free you. But it begins by saying, I'm hungry and I'm going to consume you. And I'm going to set you free. So I'd like to invite the ushers to come, and the worship team's going to come as well. And as they sing, I just want to ask you a couple questions. And it just, as you're holding the elements, you can think of these questions. And the first question is this: what am I hungry for? And maybe you're not. Maybe that's the whole thing. You say, listen, I came here, I'm not really hungry at all. I mean, I got Jesus. I got this, I got that. I'm good. I'm all good. And Jesus says, no, I lived with hunger. Get your hunger on, because there's more that I want to fill. There's more that I want to do in and through your life. And so, what am I hungry for? And if you're not hungry, just say, Jesus, would you give me some of your hunger? Because I want to love like you loved. Jesus, hungry, 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 hungry. I don't want to lose the hunger, Jesus. I want to thirst for you. And so as they sing,